this historic victory in Chattanooga for Volkswagen workers. The first successful election in organizing effort with the UAW in a non-union plant in decades, and there were enormous obstacles given the way that the South has constructed its own labor laws. But Shaun Fain and the UAW a few months ago had announced a multi-million-dollar organizing push in the South, and this was a rousing success. Over 70% voted to unionize, which will give these workers in Chattanooga even more bargaining power with their employers. And it also just sets off a lot of potentially a chain reaction for some of these other efforts at Toyota in Mississippi. And then also there's going to be an election in mid-May in the Mercedes plant in Alabama, where workers are organizing there as well. Here's Shaun Fain speaking to Chattanooga workers after this successful vote and that broader effort in the South in general.
You know, many of the talking heads and the pundits have said to me repeatedly before we announced this campaign, you can't win in the South. They said Southern workers aren't ready for it. They said non-union auto workers didn't have it in them. But you all said, watch this. You all moved the mountain. Another mountain moved. Another thing people said we can't do, and we've done it because we stood together in solidarity and we stood up for justice. You know, a few weeks back I came down here to meet with all of you and talk about this fight. And I remember telling you all then that there's a path to victory. But nobody can walk that path for you. You have to walk it yourself. And tonight, you all took a giant, historic first step on that path. But you know, and we all know, the real fight begins now. The real fight is getting your fair share. The real fight is the fight to get more time with your families. The real fight is the fight for our union contract. And I can guarantee you one thing. This international union, this leadership, this membership, all over this nation has your back in this fight. And as we begin this next chapter, I want you guys to remember one thing again. No one's going to do it for you. Stand up! You're going to win what you're willing to fight for. And as Matthew 17:20 states, and I'm going to quote this, truly I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move.
Maybe that's a bit of knowing your audience there, right? In the South, you're quoting the Bible. Love Shaun Fain.
I mean, he speaks in all registers. He'll reference Malcolm X and reference the Bible, and that's what a good leader does. And I just want to key in on the more time with your family message that he's saying, because we have a lot of problems socially in this country, and I think a lot of them have to do with how much time people have to devote their lives to earning profit for their boss.
Yeah.
I remember that Dad's on Duty thing in Louisiana, I think it was, during the pandemic, where it's like, oh, look, it turns out like behavioral issues in kids are a lot better when dads are in schools. And nobody came to think of like, oh, where are dads most of the time? Oh, they're working for a boss, breaking their back to pay rent instead of being in their families' lives. Capitalists are literally taking people out of their families' lives, and it's you need to organize workplace so you can get back to your family and get back to your friends. And then a lot of these things, like whether it's kids misbehaving or people being lonely and not having social connection and feeling alienated from other people, that stuff will sort itself out when you aren't having to work 40 hours for barely enough to pay rent.
Well, when we hear all the time about there's this massive problem of male loneliness, I mean,
Yep.
that is a problem, to your point, Matt, and it's not the problem of feminists making everybody into just like sourpusses because of how much they're demanding. It's about the fact that we have constructed our society around extraction and profit making, and it alienates people from one another. I mean, you're alienated in your workplace, even when factory workers or auto workers or people that are now kind of middle class and working from home and doing their jobs there. That's not to say that we shouldn't have done that, and it's actually probably good to increase flexibility, but all of our modes of social connection often are centered around our workplace. And for people that want to be spending more time with their families, it's very difficult when you need to be working many, many hours to make ends meet. Yeah, I mean, and you just see like this summer coming up in 2024. Last summer was hot labor summer, but this is also going to be a massive anti-war protest summer at the Democratic Convention in Chicago. Again, some more eerie kind of historical allegories or coincidences, but also just the summer of organizing, whether it's the writers in Hollywood or the actors in Hollywood or auto workers or Starbucks workers,
Trader Joe's.
Right. I mean, it's or college athletes, right? I mean, there's an understanding about what workers are up against, and that collective understanding is becoming, it's in large part due to Shaun Fain's leadership and other organizers, of course.
And teachers and like performers at Disneyland and in Washington State, the passage of the Strippers' Bill of Rights, so for sex workers as well.
Yep.
Like, there is I think as you're saying, Emma, a very prominent awakening that across every single discipline, every single industry, people deserve to have rights in their workplace, to actually make their and dignity in their workplace that comes from organizing, that comes from being those rights being enumerated.
Well, I mean, it's because party politics is completely effed and controlled by capitalists, and the only way and so where do you empower yourself? It's by politicizing your workplace and actually getting numbers. But I just want to return to this. A British medical journal 2022 study, prevalence of loneliness across 113 countries, systematic review and meta-analysis. Just one thing here from that. A combination of high socioeconomic status, overall health, welfare generosity, and high social participation could explain the low levels of loneliness in Northern European countries. In contrast, Eastern European countries tend to have poorer health outcomes, healthcare services, and state welfare. Other demographic characterizations, such as large gaps in life expectancy between men and women, hence a high proportion of widows. And also here, changes associated with transition from socialism, such as reductions in pensions paired with rising living expenses, changing care arrangements, and reduced social trust are also potential explanations for high level of loneliness in Eastern Europe. And I would just say maybe to the extent that we have a problem with loneliness, what I think we do, it is because we are in a neoliberal hellhole where actually any kind of meaning, which is the real struggle that people's lives, in anybody's lives, unless you're like, make money passively, is how do you survive on this planet despite needing to work for a wage to do so? That's what the meaning of life is, I think, for most people, but we don't have a media that can actually talk about it like that. And so of course people don't know, like going to QAnon and that sort of thing. But again, it's where people are. It's you have to work, and the less you have to work and the more you're able to get from the people who make money from you working, that the better we're all going to be.